I just came back from the Dubai FinTech Summit, and let me tell you, finance people really love their laws and regulations to the point that I was almost bored listening to all these financial words, but in a very good way, of course, because this made them, or the way the nature of finance people are, is that they went beyond the hype of AI and actually went into the depth and nuances and details of how AI is on ground today. And this is extremely valuable for people like me and you to know, because we are looking at businesses and looking how to add AI within businesses and actually understanding the realities, the risks, and what people think about AI right now and what they're doing is very beneficial for us making more money. Without further ado, let's jump into the screen. I'm going to give you everything that I learned today. So let's talk about three main things over here. Point number one is what finance people have taught us about AI. They stress tested us. We know how finance people are. They regulate everything. They're very stringent about getting everything right to avoid fraud, and as it should be. And they have stress tested AI and found out these gaps that we can find profitable as entrepreneurs and business owners or as implementers of AI. Point number two is how can you position yourself as an entrepreneur or business owner based on the current reality of what AI is on ground, not the hype everyone is talking about on YouTube and all this hype about AI is going to change the world, it's going to take over humans and so on. We're going to look at the reality of this and how can you use that to be profitable. And the point number three, which is the most important, what are super practical considerations we need to take into consideration, two words there, but that only implementers talk about. And that's exactly what I was after today when I was at the Dubai FinTech Summit, as you can see over here. And before 2 weeks, I was at Dubai AI Week. And my main objective of going to both of these was I want to find out what people are doing on ground. Where is their head at in terms of implementing AI within their organizations and businesses, either their regulators, startups, entrepreneurs, established businesses, or even large enterprises? How are they using AI in their day to day? And how can I take advantage of what's on ground and run my business based on that? So let's now start with this video. I released this video a couple of 2 weeks ago, to be exact, and it was about what my insights were from the Dubai AI Week. And I mentioned that in the past we were talking about generative AI, Midjourney, DALI, and so on. Then we moved to agentic AI, which is where we are right now. And the future looks in terms of how does it look. And if you want to look at the report, I highly suggest this report, by the way. But it's more towards institutional AI. So we went from AI as something you use to AI as something that runs for you. So people don't want to use tools anymore. They want tools to use tools. We talked about this. And my main objective today was to see how true this was, or whether we need to modify these statements over here in order to match what's on reality and on ground today. So these are some pictures, as you can see. I'm gonna go through my insights, what I think were the most practical and key insights of today. The unspoken. I'm gonna speak the unspoken. That's what I want to say. So I met with people. I went to talks. These were the startups. This was a very, very interesting talk, which I'm going to talk about all the insights I extracted from this. And I used an N18 workflow, by the way, to extract the insights. I'm going to show you exactly how. But essentially, this is everything I went to. And I had one question at the back of my head, which is where are the regulators at? What are the business owners doing? What are the individuals doing? And what are the ambitious startups saying that, okay, I built this next unicorn company, fund me because I'm going to change the world? So these were the main questions that I had on mind. And that's why I was talking to a lot of people. So point number one, and the biggest insight over here, which is insight number one, is regulating AI. Because it's finance people, it's a fintech summit. People were talking about regulation all the time. The summit started with a regulation talk. We need to regulate, but we will not stipend or halt innovation within AI and so on. So this is what it started with. And there was a key indication to me from every talk that I went, mentioning concentration risk, meaning that right now, me and you know that we depend on several entities or AI service providers, whether they are OpenAI, Anthropic, Gemini, whatever tool you are using, you depend on those tools. And if those tools go away, you don't have any provider, AI provider. So there were what they were mentioning is that there's too much dependence on a few AI providers. And the exact let's say, words that they use are over here because I recorded some of the workshops and on my voice note on my phone, and then I transcribed it over here and I fed it into N8N, and it got me a bunch of insights, and that's how I created this video right now very quickly. So let's read through these thoughts. So one was, we're thoughtful about the fact every individual business must rely on a third party to create those models. And that means concentration risk. Many people were using this word concentration risk over and over again. And there are a few third party service providers. It becomes very important to regulators that those critical providers have a response. This, I think it's responsible in the event of cyber attacks or AI misuse. We've seen, this is very important. They've already seen, it's not something theoretical may happen or threat, but they've seen incidents where large banking institutions facilitated transfers based on deepfakes. Tens of millions of dollars were lost. I remember what was said over here. So, what does this mean? As me and you, business owners, we're using AI, we're using ChatGPT, we're using Claude, we're using Gemini, and Manus as well. I'm going to tell you a sentiment over here. But we're using all these tools. We have our data, we're feeding it with our data, personal data. Is that data secure? We're asking it questions. So, ChatGPT or OpenAI has a long history of everything you asked OpenAI or ChatGPT about. They maybe asked ChatGPT, I'm sad today. What should I do? I fell off, or my friend did XYZ. What should I do? So it has that sort in its database and sometimes in its knowledge base. Even though you click those buttons saying that do not store information about me, who knows? They most probably have, because they want to improve their models. Like, this is just a business mindset. So based on all those data they have, okay, fine, you have my data, keep my data, but give me a better service and keep my data secure so you don't get hacked tomorrow and all the world knows that I was sad on May 5th because of XYZ. So this is just some considerations taken into mind. And I've been speaking to a lot of people about Manus. It's getting very popular. It's the talk of the town right now. And they don't trust it because it's a Chinese startup. So just imagine, they don't trust it because they think, okay, I'm going to upload my files to Manus. It's going to go on its computer. It's a Chinese startup. They're going to get my information XYZ. Some tackles around this, or people are talking about, okay, let's self-host N8N over here. I'm just showing you all this whole picture over here, that this is the practicality of where we are at. It's the security and the safety of the data that you have and the privacy and all this. It's a talk and it's a consideration everyone is talking about right now. So concentration risk, do not forget that. That's point number one. And it was repeated in many keynotes, workshop, fireside chats, and so on. And a very important point here. They're still figuring out how to do this. They have no clue how to do this. If one, and this was one of the things they said, I quoted them, if one does set rules prematurely, and this is why they don't want to set the rules or the laws right now, it's because of the speed of AI is developing right now. It's embarrassing to discover that AI has shifted and or evolved faster than the regulation we've laid out. So the biggest challenge, as you can see over here, AI is moving so fast in terms of developing the tools, the tech, and so on, and regulation is not catching up to that. And this is creating a gap in terms of regulators regulating AI and also AI moving forward. And within this gap is where as you can see over here, AI misuse. Here are where people or users are misusing AI to exploit these gaps for their own personal benefits, which is misuse, and it's the bad stuff that people do essentially. So just keep this in mind, because if you think about it as a business owner, entrepreneur, a business owner who has large databases, who has a lot of files, who has gets a lot of emails, they're very hesitant to add AI or some sort of new tech within their business, because what if they get hacked? What if it's not secure enough? What if a lot of possibilities? So this makes them hesitant. So if you're selling, let's say, automations, you're selling AI and so on, the small medium businesses may be fine with it, but the large enterprises, they're going to double think, okay, what's the security behind this? How can I keep it? And XYZ. So this is very important to consider. That's point number one. Point number two, AI agent problems. So they were all on the line, as even though they're finance people, they were all agreeing that we moved from machine learning to neural networks to generative AI to agentic AI, and now we're trying to regulate or work around or work with agentic AI. They all agree with that. Even though they're non-tech people, they all agree with this fact, even though they don't use tech terms as well. Some were saying that, okay, we made it more generative this year, meaning agentic AI. So they agree on this cycle. The finance space also see that we've moved from tools that assist to systems that decide and act. And this has brought a lot of big concerns for them. And I know this because way back when in 2019, I released a paper of deep neural networks where we built this controller for drones to be controlled using neural networks and so on. So I understand the technology behind it and back propagation and everything that we did in the past and where we have come today in terms of agentic AI. And we are here right now, as I mentioned. So their biggest concerns, and I'm gonna tell you my biggest concern as well within my business when I'm using the agentic AI and so on. So these are the questions. Like they weren't directly stated, but I can tell you these were just questions. Question number one is, how reliable is AI? Will it work all the time? Will it work some of the time? What if it does not work when I need it to work? So how reliable it is, and what would happen when it goes wrong in terms of operationally, legally, and what will happen to my reputation? What's the risk on that if everything goes wrong and agent goes wrong? Because agents, if they can decide on their own, they can decide wrong decisions. So this was the biggest factor out of everything. So I was talking to everyone. So I'm saying, okay, what's the biggest risk you see with AI agents within your business and so on? Everyone went back to this. More than operations, more than legal stuff, whether they're going to get sued or not, but more of what will I look like in front of high stake situations when AI agents choose the wrong thing to do. So this was very important. And point number three is, what happens when agents are being deployed blindly by business owners? This was more from the regulator side, saying that, okay, business owners may take AI right now, deploy them within their business. They have no clue what's happening. What would happen to everything if they deploy it blindly? Because they don't have the education behind it or they don't know how it works. And point number four is, how much of hallucinations can we be okay with? Because it's going to be their hallucinations within AI agents because they can decide. It's not an automation, it's more of an agent right now. And how much is fine? And to what tasks? So these were big concerns everyone was talking about. So let me give you a practical scenario where I'm taking this into high consideration right now. So I have a lot of confidential data from my previous companies, and I have a lot of data right now from my current company, let's say folders, documents, and spreadsheets, and so on. So I was thinking to build this RAG module basically, I'm not going to get technical here, but I want to put them on a database where I can retrieve them anytime I want. I want to get information out of a database anytime I want from a big database. And I want to ask this AI, because ChatGPT does not know about my company. I want to just train this certain kind of LLM model where I can talk to it and ask it about my data and so on. And maybe it starts thinking, okay, let's connect this with this part, and so on. So this is what I had in mind. And then when I came to apply it, like practically apply it, I with dummy data, of course. Not, I didn't go fully on my own data yet. I found out that it worked 80% of the time, sometimes 60% of the time. And and the reason behind that was because when you take a piece of document, let's say a sheet of document, you chunk it up into different pieces and throw it in the database. And when you ask it a question, it's going to look at the chunks and pull it out. It's going to lose a lot of context over there in terms of what this chunk means and whether there's a continuation to it up and down. Of course, you can play with the metadata, you can give it relations and so on. But this was the main issue over here. Then I was reading a paper by Anthropic saying that, okay, why don't you use contextual retrieval preprocessing? Meaning that when you're going to cut down, I'm going to try to make it less technical now. When you're going to cut down pieces of a document and put it inside a database, store it somewhere, why don't you put a statement just before it explaining this database? And then I thought about, okay, why don't I add even metadata explaining what this folder is, what is it related to, what's the previous context, what's the context after? So connect them. So each context is connected to each context. And you can see this being an issue because they had to put out a paper about it. And two, it showed that, okay, if you just do retrieval alone or you don't do the context part that I just explained to you, you're going to have an error of 5% to 6%. But if you do it with the context, you're going to get the 3.7% error. If you add some more other things that say methodologies, you're going to get 2.9%. So this error or failed retrieval or failed misinformation you're going to get, or unreliability, let's call it, one factor of it is always going to be there. And you need to solve for it by having different kind of things. Of course, it's going to come with a cost and so on. So this is my practical use case right now, where I'm designing these rags and trying to get the best possible way to get my information out. But this is what they meant in this part. I just wanted to give you an example. So we come back to YouTube now. We see these NA10 workflows, we see automations, we see these cool AI transcript, whatever. So these workflows are nice. They look very nice and they look very useful as well when you see them run it, and they should explain to you each node and the system prompt and so on. But my biggest question to all of these is, will it make me more money as a business owner or entrepreneur without adding complexity to my business in terms of, and we go back to the risk over here, which is ruining my reputation. I don't want to ruin my reputation as a business. So highly recommended. And what I found out from this summit as well, everyone was highly recommend entrepreneurs to understand how exactly AI works and understand how stupid AI is or how dumb AI is. Because essentially, how does AI work? How does ChatGPT work? It's just going to predict the next word based on the previous word. It's a predictive kind of thing. So the very important high recommendation over here is that don't treat AI as something intelligent, but understand how stupid it is, and don't treat it like a black box where you have no clue how it's working. Because if I had no clue how RAG is working, I would trust the data that when I asked a certain LLM about, let's say, a certain topic, and it gave me a bunch of data, I'm going to trust that data and move with it if I didn't understand how it works. But now I do understand. I'm taking all of these factors into consideration. And at the end, I'm saying there is a possibility that also this can be wrong. So just this is the money making part. So this is point number two. The point this is my and the point number three is one of my nicest insights of today, which is AI hype versus reality. So at the end of the one of these talks, someone said that we did a survey last year based on how much hype there was on AI, and we're doing it this year as well. We wanted to see the gap between hype and reality. What are business owners and entrepreneurs doing today, and what is the internet saying, on YouTube saying, and all these platforms saying, as or even the companies themselves, what are they saying on the news in terms of being AI driven, AI ready, AI native, and so on. Many firms claim that they use AI, they explore AI, they have it within their business and processes and so on, but very few have operationalized it. So it's just talk. That's what they found out with the survey. They did it again this year, and most people said they're AI driven, but there's no or little implementation. The point is, AI is not as widespread as the hype tells you, or the headlines tell you, or everything you see right now in terms of we did this, we're AI native. We're not there yet. But the hype, like, just understand there's a big gap between the hype and where we are on the common ground. And businesses, again, they're afraid based on the reputational risk they may have. They don't trust it, they don't understand it, and so on. And here are some scripts, or let's say words, quotes people have said. They said that we did an AI survey last year, and we're about to roll out one out this year. There's a lot of hype in the market. They agree there's a lot of hype in the market, and even the organizations that adopted AI for one specific purpose might suddenly discover it's being used for a different purpose. So they have no clue what they're doing. That's the main point. And if you're in this field of AI automation and so on, this is a massive advantage for you, because one, you get to educate them. Two, you get to figure out a certain framework, let's say your proprietary framework of understanding where the gaps within the business lie in terms of we can add AI agents, automations, and so on. And as I mentioned, reputation, fear is slowing down consumer facing AI. So these are the three main insights of today in terms of where we stand right now about with large organizations and AI and so on. And this is coming from finance people. Finance, they're too stringent. You know how they are with their laws, and they want to get everything right. And yeah, so I it's a nice perspective to see from their sides as well, instead of talking from a fully tech guy or a startup saying that we're going to change the world with AI. We just developed this AI agent that's going to revolutionize education and so on. This is where finance people are at and what they're telling you. So I went around as well on the summit and I was talking to different startups. And I can see here a bunch of papers. Let me show you these papers. So I gathered a bunch of papers, a bunch of business cards, and so on from different people. So let me just give you my thoughts around this and where I think they were at. So some examples of people I talked to where someone was building a fintech assistant, which was essentially an N8N with workflows and so on. You just set it out and it works. And he told me it works for everything. There's a voice bot, you can connect 11 labs and so on. So this is a drag and drop visual builder of AI agents. And I particularly went to the people that were doing AI. Not many were doing AI, but I went to the people who were doing AI because I want to understand where does AI stand from the finance perspective. And then there was another startup over here who was doing intelligent document automations, where you hand it a piece of document, take a picture, and it uses AI to get things and put it on your screen, essentially scraping documents, live documents through pictures, building AI developers over here, essentially a recruitment company for AI. Then there was another company who was gathering loans, essentially using predictive analytics with AI to say how likely is this person to get a loan, and they do it from a range of $0 to $15,000 max. And yeah, this were the levels of the startups that I was seeing. So one thing I would say about all the startups that I talked to today is that there is a gap between what they're doing and the reality of things. And the reality of things is exactly the 3 points I mentioned above. That's where we lie today. And they are solving for a problem that's a nice solution, but they did not take into the considerations of how it would be applied at large scale exactly over here. And a nice thing I like to do as well, and I recommend you to do as well, to go to the Y Combinator website, and you can see their request for startups. And for this year, you can see it's highly focused on AI agents, and they call it the Year of AI Agents 2025. I can zoom in a bit more here, but essentially go through it and read it. I highly recommend that. Look at the startups that they have over here in terms of they want voice agents, they want personal expense agents, AI startups, and it's really nice to see. So highly recommend for you to go to look at that. So now something very interesting to add everything together and wrap everything up is this talk over here that I attended. I attended the full talk and recorded it on my voice note, which was a talk saying from hype to adoption, how regulators are shaping the future of AI in finance, by Kristen, who is the commissioner of the CFTC, and then the moderator, of course. So I recorded the full talk, and let me show you what I did with it exactly. So you have an idea how can you use AI to be productive in these summits and events and so on. So I've shared this with the community. So essentially, it's a machine that we have, which I call the Insight Distractor. What you do is you put the transcript of anything you've recorded, either your own voice note or a video, a YouTube video, for example, this video or whatever it is, and feed it into this workflow over here, which essentially will look whether it's a transcript URL or whether it's a piece of text. And then it goes and using certain frameworks, it extracts a content skeleton out of it, meaning that it's going to extract three problem based insights, three idea based insights, and three outcome based insights, which are 9 insights. And if it's a shorter text, it's going to look at how many insights essentially there is within that. And then it's going to enrich the insights it's extracted with actual quotes from the transcripts, meaning that it's going to keep and preserve the tone, the style, and everything that was mentioned, the examples, and so on. So I fed it this transcript over here, which was the full talk. I got these 9 points over here, which are from this is the source, this is what it is. There's a bunch of things happening here. These are quotes, and this is the JSON file which I use to create content out of, and so on later on. So let me just go through a bunch of these because you're going to see how this is related to what I just told you and the insights and the startups and the regulation, and like everything just ties up very nicely, and that's why I put it over here. So they said that, or this transcript, when they were talking, they mentioned a couple of points. Point number one was regulation can't keep up with AI speed. We mentioned that. And while we see this tremendous pace of technology galloping ahead, in many respects, it feels like regulation is still struggling to catch up. And this is where we mentioned there is a gap forming because of the speed of AI and regulation. And many people are misusing this gap or exploiting this gap, in other words. So that's point number one. Point number two is rigid rules quickly become outdated, so they need to be fast. And this is the quote or what was mentioned. Or most companies are still cautious, not fully deploying AI. We just mentioned that. Surveys show that there are more hype than real usage. That's also something we mentioned. Bad actors are already exploiting AI gaps. We mentioned that. Deepfakes have already caused real financial losses. It's no longer a threat, but it's more of an actual problem right now. And over reliance on a few AI providers can create concentration risk. Very important word that they've been using all the time today. And AI can drift into unintended use cases inside organizations. Regulators prefer dialogue over top down rules. So, this essentially is the outcome of today and last week, or the last 2 weeks, in terms of the AI week. So, if you're an entrepreneur, business owner, or you're selling AI automations and workflows to other businesses, or even if you're a coach, consultant that have nothing to do with AI, but you see this AI wave coming, and you need to understand what's happening and how can you adapt to it and so on. I think it's very, very important to understand the reality of how things are on ground, because the internet talks about this amazing disruptive technology that has come to earth where it's going to disrupt all these industries and so on. But when you come on ground and you want to make this profitable and not just a hobby that you're just doing for fun and actually make money out of it, you need to understand what's happening on ground, understand this big gap, and actually solve for this gap. Because history shows that every time you solve for a gap, whether it's an informational gap or an implementation gap, or even this gap that we're talking about in terms of the AI gap, that's where the most money is made. So I highly, highly recommend to keep this at the back of your head and look and monitor how the market is moving in order to make this a success and dominate this gold rush that we have right now.